Hello, my name is Kohler, and you might have seen me on the Catholic Apologetics podcast, Timeless Truth. This is my story, and this is the Dizzy Pilgrim. If you've been following Timeless Truth at all, and you've come over here to see, then you probably know that at the beginning of the podcast, I started having a medical issue, and a medical issue that caused me to move locations. And this medical issue falls a lot in line with a condition called vestibular migraines. Vestibular migraines, one of the main symptoms of it is vertigo. And so you kind of lose your sense of balance and you lose your equilibrium. I like to say a lot of times that, I don't really have a vestibular system anymore, and that my eyes override it. Though I do have a vestibular system, it's just that my brain doesn't really know how to compute the signals that's coming in. One of my doctors said, from the results of one of my tests, showed that there was a communication error between my eyes, my ears, and my brain, and that it most likely was vestibular migraines. Now, there's a lot of medical things that I've gone through that I don't really want to discuss right now. I haven't really gotten the best care, per se, that someone would with this issue would have. But I've gotten to a point to where I can function relatively okay, not to the point where I'm able to go back to work, but I've gotten to a point to where I can function on daily tasks, which is something that is new for me. So this is my story. I wanted to start this podcast for anyone who has some type of issue, something similar to this, so that they can connect, but also for any person that's going through any suffering, to show them that it is possible to connect it with Christ, and that Christ is there. Because without it, there's a few options that we can have. We can wallow in our self-pity, we can push through and kind of lose our faith through it because it kind of feels like God's kind of absent, or we can dive deep into the suffering and connect it with Christ's suffering, and it can actually deepen our faith with him even more and understand how much deeper he loves us than what we ever thought. So I wanted to give a little bit of a backstory of where I was before everything changed, and to where I am, and to the change itself. This will be a few parts, and I don't know where this channel will go, but I hope it will be a source for people to have hope in Christ. So my life prior to everything changing, I graduated in May of 2023 from the University of Kentucky, and I received a Bachelor's of Science in Materials Engineering and 2 minors in Mathematics and Physics. So it really set me up for a really good job going into the secular world, going into industry. It really was very marketable for myself to be, and there's a lot of smarts involved with it, a lot of brain power using, and when things go awry, it flops your life. I also became Catholic in April of 2022, and the Catholic Church really deepened my faith with Jesus to the point to where I can say that beforehand it wasn't as deep as it is now. It's really interpersonal to the point to where I spend a lot of quiet time with him, rather than just being in silence or trying to find some type of media to consume myself with. And I'm very grateful for how Christ has walked with me through my life. After I graduated college, I became an engineer, and I worked at an aluminum manufacturing plant for a year and a half. And then I switched jobs to a truck assembly plant as an engineer for both places. We also started the podcast shortly before everything started. And that has been one of the biggest blessings, is to be able to work with some of my friends on spreading the faith. So everything started on April 9th of 2025 of this year. And basically what had happened was I was on a work trip, a day work trip. So I traveled about 3.5 hours away from my plant, from where I was working, and had a few meetings, and then I drove back. And throughout that day, I had a massive headache that was pretty much a migraine. It was throughout the entirety of the day. And I have a pretty high pain tolerance, so it was like I'll muster through it and just push along, even though it was extremely painful. And when I got back, there was enough time to, go and hang out with some of my friends. And when I was getting back to my car, it felt like my feet had fallen out from underneath me, and everything started spinning, and everything just didn't seem okay. It felt like potentially my blood sugar had dropped, and maybe I was hungry because I hadn't eaten that much day. Maybe I was thirsty because I hadn't drinking much that day. I didn't know what was going on, but I just knew that I was dizzy, and I didn't really know what to do. And so I got into my car and I drove to a restaurant so that we could, if it was my blood sugar, that would help. And it didn't help. I had to take many, many, many breaks from the restaurant back to my house. I only live about 10 minutes away from my house, and it took about 45 to an hour just because I couldn't see where I was. And it was a necessity, because really none of my other friends could drive or had a vehicle or could pick me up that was available at that time. And so I was really kind of all alone and had to push through, even though one of my friends was in the car, and we got home safely. And I tried to sleep off what was going on, because I've slept things off before. And I went to bed, and I woke up, and everything was still spinning. Everything was still not how it was supposed to. And I just couldn't understand what was going on. I had to use the wall to help me get out of bed. I had to figure something out on what to do. And I messaged my boss saying, something's wrong. I need to go to urgent care. And so I went to urgent care. But on the way to urgent care, since I was still dizzy and I was kind of disoriented, I missed the exit, and so I had to turn around and come back. And it was really, really dangerous but I didn't really have any other options. And so I got to urgent care, and they started asking me a lot of questions. They saw my eyes starting to move back and forth. It's a symptom called nystagmus, to where your eyes kind of jitter back and forth. And they had kind of associated that it was probably benign vertigo about what I was going through. And they couldn't do the Dix-Hallpike maneuver or the Epley maneuver because they weren't really trained in it. But that's how they figure out if it's the inner ear crystals, is by doing the Dix-Hallpike maneuver and the Epley maneuver. It sadly wasn't that. but it's okay. So after they had given me kind of that diagnosis, I started asking questions a little bit more. It's like, well, does that explain the vision issues that I was going through? So not only was I spinning, but I also had vision issues to where it looked like floaters, I guess is the proper medical term for it. But what it really looked like was shadows moving in and out. And I think what that really is the aura of a migraine. So it's a lot of, like, it just felt like a lot of shadows were moving, and that the colors of the ceiling tiles and the colors of the floor were actually changing. It was just, everything was changing and kind of vibrating, and I didn't know what was going on. And so I told that to the doctor, and he said, we don't have the equipment to deal with that. It could very well be a stroke that you're going through. And then they called an ambulance and sent me to the ER. As I got to the ER, they gave me some anti-nausea medicine in the ambulance, which was really good because I was extremely nauseous. I wanted to throw up everywhere, even though I didn't have any food in my stomach. And when we got there, they put me in, and I was in the ER for the entirety of the day. They ran a bunch of tests. They checked my blood. They checked a lot of things for my blood, and they checked. They put me into an X-ray. They also put me into a CT scan for my head, and they also took an ultrasound of my eyes. They put the goop on my eyes and put the ultrasound right there, and just to see if everything was okay. And everything came back okay, and they just couldn't figure out what was going on, though my eyes were still jittering back and forth, showing that I was still going through a lot of dizziness. It was not fun to be in that hospital, and they basically tell you, we don't know what's going on. You're going to need to check up with a neurologist and an ENT, and we're just going to send you back. And what they ended up giving me throughout that, just to kind of help the symptoms a little bit, they gave me Benadryl, which is really supposed to knock you out for probably a few hours or so, but I was only out for a half hour. It did knock me out, but only for a half hour, and that's probably due to my body being in the idea of the fight or flight response. So it's trying to figure out, it can't really do the healing process. It needs to protect itself from whatever's happening. And to do that, you need to be awake. And so I was only out for a half hour. They gave me some other medications to try to help. They gave me something called meclizine, which has the common name of Dramamine. And meclizine didn't really help at all. I would go from a super high spin to a low spin, but never normal. It was always spin, 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 or just on a low spin. And it was really a swaying motion as well. I guess one of the best ways to describe it is if you've ever fallen asleep and right before you fall asleep, you feel like you're floating above your body. And that swaying motion and that kind of like that spinning motion, that's what I feel on a constant basis. I feel like I'm about 20 feet above where my body actually is. That's the first day. April 9th going to April 10th of this year, 2025. There's a lot more about what we did to get me to a point to where I am today, and that'll be on subsequent episodes. But what I really wanted to talk about today is, yes, it's a really hard suffering to have your life kind of uprooted like that, but that doesn't mean God's not there. that doesn't mean Jesus isn't present. See, what I've learned throughout this process, especially when it first starts happening, is that in the trenches of life, Christ is right there next to you, fighting alongside you. He hasn't abandoned you. He's right there, carrying you, supporting you, doing everything that you would think that he would do, though it may not be in the open. And that's something to really hold on to, especially in any type of suffering. Because remember, Christ suffered and died for all of us. We can confidently say that when he was on the cross, you were at the forefront of his mind, because he is 100% man and 100% God. And so his divinity would have been able to know who you are. And we can confidently say that he did this for you. And that's something to hold on to, because he knows what you're going through, and we can attach any part of our suffering to him. One of the things that I really like to picture is that the suffering that we go through is a piece of of his cross that he is sharing with us. And so we don't want to lose our faith. We don't need to lose our faith when it feels like he's abandoned us. Most of the time, it's really just us looking the wrong direction of where he actually is. So stay tuned. I'm going to try to do one episode a week for this. I haven't really identified on what day. It's probably going to come out on Saturdays. It could come out or sometime earlier in the week. Thanks. And may Christ be with you.